But this is not the only showdown that Parliament witnessed today. Following the India-U.S. trade deal, the opposition has been attempting to corner the government over the specifics of the deal, seeking more clarity. Earlier in the day, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal briefed both houses on the deal that was only culminated amid tariff tensions and after months of back and forth between Delhi and Washington. The Commerce Minister assured that New Delhi was successful in ensuring the protection of sensitive sectors, including agriculture and dairy. He made identical statements both in the Lok Sabha and in the Rajya Sabha, but the opposition would have none of it. I want to first play out what the minister said in terms of what India's red lines are and how they are protected in this India-U.S. trade deal, and then we'll open this up as well.
इन वार्ताओं के दौरान भारतीय पक्ष अपने संवेदनशील क्षेत्रों विशेषकर कृषि और दुग्ध क्षेत्रों के हितों की रक्षा सुनिश्चित करने में सफल रहा है। साथ ही यह साझेदारी लघु और मध्यम उद्यमी एमएसएमईज उद्यमियों कुशल श्रमिकों और उद्योग के लिए नए अवसर खोलेगी। उन्नत प्रौद्योगिकियों तक पहुंच का सुगम बनाएगी और भारत के मेक इन इंडिया फॉर द वर्ल्ड, डिजाइन इन इंडिया फॉर द वर्ल्ड और इनोवेट इन इंडिया फॉर द वर्ल्ड के दृष्टिकोण को साकार करने में सहायक होगी।
All right, I want to go across to Grant T. Harris. He's former Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Industry and Analysis. Thank you very much, Mr. Harris, for speaking with us. You know, there's been a lot of consternation here in India about the details of this deal. Yes, we know the headline numbers, the phone conversation that happened between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump on Monday, India's tariffs being reduced from 50% to 18%. But there are a few things that India is sort of worried about, top of which is this comment that the president made a couple of nights when he announced the deal, that India is going to buy $500 billion of American produce. We don't know what this is, and this figure itself seems quite sky high. How would you speak to those concerns? Is it just a lot of bombast by the president, as is his nature, or should we be worried about buying more and more American produce, something which India may or may not be able to do?
So far, we've seen some really eye-popping numbers, like $500 billion in purchases of U.S. goods, but we just don't have a lot of detail on what that would mean or the timeframes, and it's really hard to know how solid of a commitment that is. We've seen social media posts by President Trump. We saw a response by Prime Minister Modi where he didn't respond specifically on buying Russian oil. He really locked in on the 18% tariffs for what India would face. But there really wasn't any fidelity or specificity about this commitment on $500 billion that President Trump has stated. We've seen in his negotiations with other countries that this administration has raised large sums like that, but that the details aren't always clear. And it's pretty hard to imagine getting to $500 billion in any reasonable time frame, given that the U.S. exports a little bit over $41 billion annually in goods to India.
So that's one part. The other, of course, is a big red line here in India, and that was one of the reasons why the deal was held up for so many months, is on agriculture and dairy. It's a very sensitive sector here in India. More than half the population depends on agriculture. And we're given to understand, and the minister made a statement in Parliament today as well, that India's red lines when it comes to agriculture and dairy are protected. But that's quite in contrast to what the American Agriculture Secretary, Brooke Rollins, posted on Twitter, I think a couple of days ago, saying that America is going to export a hell of a lot more into India and the agri-deficit with India is going to be evened out, etc. That's again leading to some concerns here in India. How would you allay those fears?
Here again, it's hard to know the specifics because they haven't been released. The U.S. Trade Representative, Jamieson Greer, has said that India would reduce tariffs for things like nuts, fruits, vegetables, wines, and spirits, but he didn't say anything about things like soybeans, sugar, dairy, rice, beef. So it's really unclear and doesn't seem, based on what information we have, that this would open large new markets for U.S. exporters in those areas. It's also really important to recognize these issues have been sources of tension for many years. And without having a really explicit and detailed agreement in place, it's hard to imagine that all these barriers, both tariff and non-tariff barriers, would have been resolved.
By when do we get to know the fine print? I was speaking to Professor John Mearsheimer yesterday, and he said the devil is in the detail. He says it's an American phrase. I guess it is an American phrase. I don't know. But he says, we need to know what the framework is, what the details are, what are the products that go to 18% duty from India to the United States, and what are the products that go to 0% duty from the United States to India. But what are the next steps, and how and when do we get to know what the modalities are, what the devil in the detail is?
That's unclear. The U.S. Trade Representative has said that these issues are still being papered and agreed. It sounds, in my read, like there's some broad agreement on a few aspects, but it's unclear how much. And until we see those details, it'll be really difficult to assess. Here's what I make of it. Diplomatically, it clearly seems to be a breakthrough because tension had been high, friction had been high. It's a very positive development in the bilateral relationship to have this goodwill. Is it a revolutionary or transformative trade deal, quote unquote? That is really unclear and unlikely based on the information that we have. It doesn't seem to open large new markets for the U.S. to the degree that we're talking about in agriculture or other areas. A lot of the tariff reduction that India is facing is getting reduction on tariffs that Trump had increased. And so there still is very positive, there's still very positive news here, but so far it's really by social media, and we need to see exactly what's agreed. We need to know what's in, what's out, over what time frame, and is it ironclad?
And very quickly, Mr. Harris, what do you think brought this about? After all, both sides had been negotiating this. There was a lot of back and forth. It seemed like a deal was unlikely or not coming through easily. What finally clinched it, you reckon?
I think there are a few things. One is that India recently clinched a free trade agreement with the European Union after years and years of negotiation. And it's a comprehensive agreement. And I think that's a really important step forward for the EU and India. And from the U.S. perspective, there's a need to make sure that we are continuing to work on supply chains and improving trade relations with India being such an important partner. I think also Prime Minister Modi reaching out to President Trump was a big step forward too. President Trump really believes in personal diplomacy. His feelings about heads of state and other governments, his feelings about issues are really important in his policy views. And I think that the timing of this was able to come together. However, as we've said here a couple of times, we're really only seeing headline announcements, social media posts. They don't match up one for one between what the president and the prime minister are saying. It will be exceedingly important for both governments to reduce this to writing and to hammer out the details.
Okay. Grant T. Harris, former Assistant Secretary of Commerce, thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18.
Thank you.